Martin, what makes people afraid?
Something that they don't know.
And something that looks so ominous that survival seems a remote possibility. And would pestilence qualify? Yes. Would a nuclear war qualify?
Okay. And even the threat of nuclear war is already giving them that fear.
Now, I find it interesting that the Bible in Matthew 24 speaks about rumors of war. And rumors of war seem to be a very prominent feature, right?
It is. And it's casting fear the whole time.
Yes, so there is war, but the rumor of war is the one that is casting the fear.
It's almost as if it's worse off in the beginning, because eventually when it happens, it's almost as if the rumors have desensitized you.
All right. So let's just look at a few verses here from Daniel 11, because that was our introduction, that this prophecy is going into fulfillment. So the king of the north versus the king of the south. Now we're actually not living in these verses right here. We're living a little bit later. We'll come to those verses that come after these. But there's an interesting or very important principle that we find here. Namely that both of these kings, the king of the north and the king of the south, hearts shall be to do mischief, and they shall speak lies at one table. That's a very important clue. Very important.
You cannot take this away, because you're going to fall into a trap if you don't adhere or listen or take attentive attention to this part.
So here we have two adversaries, and they're speaking lies, and they're speaking lies at one table. So they appear to be adversaries, but they're actually sitting at one table. So the populace is being fooled. There's no doubt that there's turmoil in Ukraine. There's no doubt that there are terrible situations. But whether the media is telling us the truth, that is another story.
You see, that's why I'm trying to say this, because we don't want to come over as unsympathetic.
No.
That's the last thing I want to do. I really sympathize for all, and it's not a good thing that there's ever war. Just like you said, we have to look through the bigger picture and just put it into perspective.
So if we look at the prophetic picture, here in the end, there is going to be a clash. It is a north-south clash. But they're sitting at the same table, and they're planning mischief. Together with those that are against the Holy Covenant. We know who they are.
And the mischief involves deceit, and that will, propaganda will fall part of that.
Absolutely. All right. Now, what is the agenda here? Many people believe that Russia, together with communist China, that they portray absolutely the king of the south, because that is communism, it's atheism, and that is what they stand for. Then the west, they stand with the king of the north. This is the idea that is out there.
And with that, the king of the north stands for morality, and the king of the south for immorality.
Now, that picture, to me, Martin, does not fit. And I'll tell you why. Because in the type, in the original, there were two literal parties. The one was literal Babylon. That stood for the religio-political system. And that literal Babylon was against the king of the south that stood for literal Egypt. Once you move into the spiritual realm, you cannot apply physical nations to the prophetic picture. And the book of Revelation in chapter 11 makes it quite clear when it says spiritually Egypt.
Yes.
When this power that comes up from the bottomless pit, this final conglomerate, which belongs to this terrible beast that has never changed its colors, really. When that comes up and rules, then there's this supposed clash with a spiritual king of the south. So we're dealing with a mindset. We're not dealing with nations. Now, once you make it nations, then your eyes are looking in a particular geographic area. So let's try and get that out of our picture and say we're not dealing with countries. We're dealing with mindsets. In the Middle Ages, who controlled morality?
The papacy.
Absolutely the papacy. Rigidly. Did they use the secular power to enforce their morality?
Yes.
Yes.
The state had to enforce it.
Since the French Revolution, did they lose that capacity to use the state to enforce their morality?
Yes.
It was called a mortal wound.
That's it.
All right? So they lost that power. But the mortal wound will be healed. Now, Martin, this secularism, is it confined to nations or is it present in all nations?
It's in all nations.
Aha.
Definitely.
This king of the north mentality that we want morality to be controlled by a particular entity, call it the church. Is that in all nations?
Yes.
Yes.
Well,
even in communist China.
exactly.
Isn't the church underground but very active in China?
Yes.
Isn't the church active in Russia?
Definitely. Very active.
Isn't the church active in the Ukraine?
Yes.
Very much so, right? So you cannot say there is the enemy and here is the friend. It is more diffuse than that. We're dealing with a mindset. We're dealing with two ideologies that are going to clash here. The one they call the King of the North ideology, which is the religio-political system enforcing morality, a particular kind, under a particular authority, namely that of the papacy. Very well. Now, if this is a game, sitting at the same table, to get the world out of fear of nuclear conflict, to eventually embrace the moral superiority of the papacy, then the kings of the world will be giving their power unto the beast, right? Is that a prophetic picture that, in view of our short chronology time frame, would have to happen more or less now?
Yes. And it will have to happen relatively fast.
The last events will be
Rapid ones.
rapid ones. We've just moved from a major calamity into the next calamity.